Hey, thanks for checking out The Devastated Kingdom, a spoken word album made entirely of quotes from my book, Ambitious Heroes and Heartache, a book about what it means to be human. This entire album is contained on this one file and meant to be listened to straight through. If you'd like to listen to tracks individually, you can check them out on my podcast channel, Morning Coffee with Rick Alexander. Without further ado, enjoy the album. Joseph Campbell said that suddenly you're ripped into being alive, and life is pain, and life is suffering, and life is horror. But my God, you're alive, and it is spectacular. From the moment we're abruptly removed from the comfort of the womb and inserted into time and space, we find ourselves amidst the many intersections and paradoxes that define the human experience. Eventually, we'll find ourselves standing at the crossroads between heaven and hell, and we'll have to learn to engage with the animating forces in our lives that create both. As we age, we'll also find that there's a battle of opposing forces taking place within us. We'll have to choose between following our daring heart or our cautious mind. At different times, each will present their own drawbacks and good fortunes. At other times, we'll find ourselves amidst the devastated kingdom, desperately trying to figure out what we must do to set things right. When we figure out what that is, we'll get a glimpse of what we're meant for, and we'll find ourselves inhabiting that sacred space between chaos and order, living in flow and rhythmic harmony with the world around us. There will be seasons ahead that bring us both devastation and prosperity. Feeling broken will be just as short-lived as feeling whole, but we will inevitably learn to accept one and reject the other. As we do, we'll try to build our lives in the good and the orderly, but we'll find out that our prosperity is continuously thwarted by the wild that sits beyond the castle walls. And we'll be constantly thrown out of Eden, as lovers break our hearts, dreams don't materialize, and the impermanent world around us continues its many cycles of death and rebirth, dancing on ad nauseum with eternity. And this dance makes up the very fabric of our existence, and it defines our life's journey. If we don't have the right vantage point to see clearly what's happening within our lives, it's unlikely that we'll be able to author a better story. The wrong vantage point paints us as a victim, when in fact we're a student. It blinds us, when in fact we'd be able to see perfectly if we were looking in the right direction. And it keeps us stuck, when in fact the path we can't find has the answers that we need. We simply don't know where to begin improving our lives when delusion is the rule of the day. But as for our story, let us go back to the beginning. In those first few moments after birth, we'll toggle back and forth between the terror of contending with an entirely new world and the wide-eyed wonder that this new world inspires when we begin to feel safe enough to appreciate it. And though we come out kicking, screaming, and totally resistant to this new environment, this is actually the first of many moments that we don't feel ready for but are completely equipped to handle. We've got all the basics, the ability to process oxygen, consume nutrients, and adapt to a new environment, if only for a little nurturing. Note the difference between feeling ready and being ready. We rarely feel like we have what we need to compete in a new environment, but with enough time and trust, we find that as humans, we're fundamentally created with the ability to overcome odds. In a barren universe, we're the only thing that we know of in 93 billion light years in every direction that made the impossible trek to sentience, from matter to spirit. If we are to wake up at all, we should begin by waking up to the unfathomable opportunity that our lives actually are. birth, our newly formed minds and bodies have just entered into an agreement with reality about how we will proceed through the many intersections and paradoxes that we find ourselves in. For our part, we will obey gravity, keep our eyes open and our chest tall, and dutifully march in the same direction as time. In return, life will give us the wisdom that one can only attain from living in the right way. Life will also feel inclined to give us joy if we're able to show the proper amount of gratitude for the gift of the present moment. Finally, and hopefully, after many hard-fought battles, our lives will bring us the satisfaction of a peaceful departure. The kind of restful sleep one earns when a day is well spent and a worthwhile adventure has been had. But of course, none of this is guaranteed. Many people don't live a worthwhile adventure at all. Some will have high hopes, but the seasons of their life will be cruel. Many will find that over time they become a much worse version of who they used to be. Others still will sink into the chaotic and stormy waters of their lives. Certain people among us will find it within themselves to re-emerge better than before, while others will never be seen again. A crucial mistake in the human experience is taking all of the confusion and perplexing situations that we face and allowing the suspicion about what they mean to be hijacked by pessimistic narratives coming from people with a poor understanding of reality. Failure can be the best or worst thing to ever happen to you. The kicker is that the only one who gets to decide is the person who's affected by it, you. You can marvel at the universe beyond your understanding and see all that it might hold for your life. Or you can continue to fight it as if you are in an adversarial relationship with everything that you don't understand. But again, the only person who can decide that is the person standing face to face with the unknown. That's still you. One of the most difficult parts of life is accepting that your invitation to live deeper and be more can feel like the absolute worst thing that's ever happened to you. Many of us go through these difficulties all the time, but we frame them in a way that isn't necessarily helpful, and because of this, they don't feel much like an invitation at all. Our pain often becomes something we must simply get through or survive, but we shouldn't forget that many people's lives are made much better because someone else went through something painful and refused to let others live with that same fate. People start charities, march against injustice, and generally strive to make the world a better place because they cannot stand to stay on the sidelines while others suffer. See, because there isn't a thing that you enjoy in this life that someone before you has not previously suffered for. That is how the world evolves and continues to improve. All you have to do is play your part and pay it forward. It happens to be the least and most you could possibly do with your life. There's an invitation to make your world a better place buried in every difficult thing that you go through. Our world is structured in such a way that we're always one move or conversation away from chaos. One diagnosis, one breakup, one loss of a job, one wrongdoing, or one false step can sling us into complete catastrophe. And it can happen in a single moment. You're either going through something difficult now, or you will be in the future. And when you are, things that have always made sense suddenly do not. People you've always known can suddenly feel like strangers. The cosmos, God, gods, or whatever you believe in, whatever you pray to, which once seemed to be just and operating out of a sense of order, will upon further inspection begin to appear cruel and vindictive. There is, however, a second mode of being in the world. It requires you to live and let go, not because the other person or the situation deserves it. They might not, but because you do. Because resentment will breed contempt, and contempt will turn your life into a living hell. And you don't deserve to live in hell any longer. This isn't a call for positive self-talk that doesn't match the reality you're living in. And it's also not the easy route around pain. It's looking chaos directly in the face and just asking it for answers. even if those answers aren't going to be pleasant to face. Because understanding that everything is happening for you isn't about trying to change reality, it's about choosing to face struggle in a productive way. You have to look earnestly to find the beneficial side of pain, but there's always one that does exist. And if you're able to pinpoint it, you can begin to start rebuilding your life with that reason as your foundation. You know, everybody loves to quote Winston Churchill, when you're going through hell, keep going. But it's occurred to me that maybe you should stop and look around, figure out what landed you there so that you don't hit the roundabout on your way out and end up back in the same place 2 years from now. As you reflect on tragic moments in your life, perhaps in the past or current, you have to ask yourself productive questions that help you reframe the way you're thinking about what you're going through. What if this isn't the worst thing to happen to you? What if you found reasons why it's even good or at least tolerable for the time being? What if finding the reason that things are happening for you instead of to you is the foundation from which you get to build a life that is bigger and better than even the original reality that you had envisioned for yourself? The fact that life has the ability to be greater than we ever imagined is reason enough not to hold on too tightly to what we imagine. This is the beauty in realizing the simplicity of our minds in comparison to the cosmos. It has more in store for you than you have the capacity to even realize, should you decide to let go and accept the invitation.
Have faith in the fact that difficult things can be good for you.
We're simultaneously found and created on our path to become all that we can be in this life. We find our spirit and resolve, our true selves, as we test our mettle against the obstacles that require us to become the type of person who can overcome those types of obstacles. We're created in the same way that a blacksmith forges an iron weapon through repeated bouts of heat, hammering, and twisting. In this way, we become the sharpest and strongest version of ourselves as we are also exposed to such measures. We're not looking for the absence of struggle in this life, but rather the right struggle that will require our adaptation. It is in that adaptation that our character and ultimately our legacy will be crafted. Because most are caught between who they are and who they know they could be, unaware that their true potential will not come out from its internal caverns without a fight. I mean this quite literally. Human potential is not revealed without an obstacle forcing it to be so. We're similar to the plants you see crawling along interwoven pieces of latticework in front of great castles. We need something to object to reality so that we can grow against it. As much as we might want to fight this fact, we are all inextricably linked in this life at least, both to each other and to our problems. Our entire world consists of many subject-object relationships, meaning we only know ourselves in relation to other things.
Have faith in the fact that difficult things can be good for you.
Consider the fact that if a single ball were floating in unlimited space in every direction, it would be impossible to know anything about that ball. Is it moving forward or backward? Is it traveling quickly or slowly? We only get that information when we figure out what the object is in relation to. Everything about our world relies on another if it wants to know anything at all about itself. In that same way, our potential inside lies dormant like a ball in space, something only one step above non-existence. But when we find the right problem to solve, when the right thing objects to our reality, it calls to our potential like a siren, coaxing it out reluctantly as our environment slowly but surely demands more and more of us. See, we who might dare to wonder where the outer limits of our capabilities lie, are then eternally tied to the struggle in all of its many lessons. Men and women are born as people, but we are made into something more through our effort. At the bottom of every religion is the idea that we can live life in a way that positions us to build a bridge to eternity. Through the transformation that takes place in the pursuit of a worthy ideal, we're able to transmute what is into what can be. In that space where potential is made into reality lies humanity's most sacred gift, the alchemical process that transforms suffering into beauty, pain into purpose, and whatever madness we've been shouldered with into something more useful, something refined. When we speak of being made in God's image, I'm left to wonder if that is a nod at our creative power. We're able to give form to chaos, and in doing so, usher in the birth of a new world.
Have faith in the fact that difficult things can be good for you.
Much of human behavior can be explained by watching the wild beasts around us. They're constantly teaching us things about ourselves and the way of the universe. But most people are too blind to watch and listen. Thousands of years from now, humanity will merge with technology, and in that moment, we'll be far less beholden to the nature from which we were born. But as of now, that simply isn't the case. Regardless of advancements in biotechnology, we will remain at the demands of a breathing, sweating monkey suit. And if we want our lives to function optimally, then we must give that monkey suit what it requires. The current state of the human condition can never be fully separate from the nature from which we evolved. Our predilections, behaviors, and even spirit must remain somewhat in concert with the ebb and flow of the earth that we came out of. When we become too synthetic and spend too much time manipulating our biology, it's usually our well-being that pays the price. In my observation, the human animal functions at its peak when it reverts to its more primitive forms, even if only for a moment. Amidst the mountains and jungles, the mind has room to roam, just as the body does. The detox from our synthetic lives provides clarity to think and establish order where chaos has a habit of building during our commuting, bill pay, and TPS reports. The stress hormone cortisol was originally meant to help you evade the parts of nature that want to kill you, not nature altogether. The lights and screens that rule our lives tend to throw the animal in us out of whack. So we use uppers to function, downers to sleep it off, and therapy to help us cope with the world we've built. Looking out across the ocean or up into the stars makes us feel small yet centered, because deep down there's a recognition of self. We're primarily made of the same things that fell from the sky and fill the ocean. Our matter is simply organized differently for the time being, considering that we came from and eventually will be reabsorbed in nature. Is it unreasonable to believe that our current lives can't be improved by that same force? If you want to get a little closer to knowing the real you that's been buried beneath the weight of the world and the social pressures of your environment, you don't have to look further than the wild that's butted up against our cities. The facade and the fake have a way of making us feel out of sorts because, although that's what we construct, it's not necessarily what we're constructed for. As we learn to grapple with our own nature, we would be remiss to overlook the fact that our very being was forged in the animal kingdom. Before the formation of the frontal lobe and the eventual industrialization of our playground, we prevailed in the ultimate game of savagery, survival of the fittest. Looking at the mountains now, they serve as a fossilized backbone of a prehistoric time, one that saw humans proving their worth with their legs, lungs, and grit. We're now developed enough to look at our own nature and try to curb it to appease the masses. And despite the efforts of even the most civilized among us, however, our nature won't even be fully curbed, as we are very much still dealing with biological baggage that developed during our earlier fight for survival. The way that evolution operates is by baking our roadmap for survival into our DNA. What this means for the modern man is that we've quite literally been optimized to survive in a world we no longer live in. All of our introspective analyzing and assimilating has left us much more civilized. At least, that's what we tell ourselves. With our newfound ability to comprehend the ramifications of our actions, we've developed coping mechanisms that see our nature for its primal actuality and constantly attempt to shove it down. We often minimize our own qualities and hope no one will ever know us for who we truly are. Our surroundings no longer require the savagery that they once did. So we're left to explain away and subdue the sides of us that are still more beast than human. Pretending you don't have an animalistic nature doesn't make it so. It only makes it so that you don't get to control its expression. And the way life always seems to balance itself out, what goes up always comes down. What we bury will eventually resurface. Just like a seed can resurface as a great oak tree, so too do our repressed feelings and urges resurface as something bigger, something greater, in the worst sense of the word. Our attempts to suppress what we really want and who we really are can manifest down the road as much of what ails the human condition. By never getting to know the wild side of ourselves, we end up acting like and eventually becoming someone that we don't know at all. In modern society, the environment we're creating is putting us in a tricky situation. We're both the animal and the zookeeper. Just like with any zoo, we often have to drug ourselves to cope with the walls around us that we've constructed. The only difference between the actual zoo and most of us who work unhappy office jobs is that our cage isn't actually locked. tendency to let the world negatively influence us more and more. We vibrate at a lower frequency as we contend with cynical thought patterns that spin circles around our mind and ensnare our good sense. As a result, we begin to put our wonder in some really unfortunate places. We wonder if we'll ever be good enough, or why the person we like isn't calling us back. We wonder if we'll ever catch a break, or when it will finally be our turn. The world has a way of turning our wonder from a place of excitement about the opportunities in our lives to insecurities about how we will be perceived by everyone else. Suddenly our wonder, which used to be a source of hope, becomes the source of our anxiety. Untangling the feelings that rob you of your well-being starts by understanding that the root of all anxiety is the unknown. When we start looking at the unknown as if it is something to be feared, we give our anxiety the room it needs to grow. Our brains are staggeringly good at vivid visualizations. We're good at fabricating the terror that could be lurking in the unknown, and we have a tendency to want to review that terror every time we have a quiet moment. Dealing with the unknown in life is just like everything else. It's made better or worse by where you choose to put your focus. If you focus on what could go wrong, the sense of wonder that you've been avoiding is likely to find itself heading in the wrong direction. In this case, the fear of what could go wrong is going to ruin your well-being far more than anything actually going wrong ever could. Though things certainly do periodically go wrong and fall apart, the fear is not periodic, it is constant. If you start to make decisions based on fear, those decisions will force you to avoid things you want due to the possibility of an adverse result. Most likely, your life will continue down the path because everything in our psyche works on momentum. Fear only begets more fear. When we're young, we want to be heroes, rock stars, or princesses because no one has told us that we can't yet, and so our minds are still free to believe that we can. In reality, heroes, rock stars, and princesses exist now. You're just not one of them. That doesn't mean that you can't be. Most people don't know any of these kinds of people because the soil they've planted themselves in doesn't allow something of that caliber to grow out of it. We should not exist in a barren desert convincing ourselves that flowers aren't real because we can't see any of them. All our lives we're told not to wonder. We're told to play it safe and be reasonable in our expectations. To take this tact, however, is to forget who we are. To be human is to risk. It is only through risk that you will gain what you don't yet have. The good news is that you have had the skills to live this way since day one. You just have to commit to never having the maybe I should have conversation with yourself. You will know which people don't make that commitment because they will be the first ones to have the, well, maybe you shouldn't conversation with you. When it comes to crafting a truly authentic life, that childlike wonder we're taught to dismiss is the starting point to all of it. As we age and focus much more on responsibility and what we should do, we focus much less on every little feeling and thought that arises. And as a consequence, our innate desires are deprioritized. But those interests are a doorway to another kind of life. We have semi-formed ideas about something we might want to do or try at some point, or places we'd like to go. But we're taught to dismiss those thoughts as unimportant. I'm going to ask you to dig up the forgotten parts of yourself and answer the call that is before you. Progress and consciousness only move in one direction in this life, and that's forward. At times, it will all feel overwhelming, and at other times, the journey will feel altogether not worth the effort. You might think about the growth journey as if you've been living your entire life in a dark room with no windows. You aren't unhappy because it's all you've ever known. Then one day you see a little light peeking through the walls. As you approach the light, you realize that the walls are actually blinds. You lift the blinds only to realize that there's an entire other world outside that you knew nothing about. There are mountains and rivers and animals and sunlight. From that point forward, you will never be content to go back to living in the dark room, no matter how happy you were. You won't stop until you get out there and experience this new world for yourself. There is no going back to how it used to be in the dark room. The trajectory of your life will be forever changed, whether you like it or not. I've found that asking the right questions of yourself is akin to pulling up the blinds. Each new question that you ask will hint at the ultimate truth of our reality, and that will unfold 10 more. Thus, understanding the human experience, it isn't about getting the right answers, only asking the right questions. questions and ideas in this album are the ones that have led me to believe that a new way of existing in the world from what most of us are taught is entirely possible, if only you can shape your beliefs to match it. Now, as you venture outside of your dark room, you'll inevitably find that not all that glitters is gold. You'll find that the mountains are taller than they looked and the rivers are deeper than you ever imagined. But it won't matter because this is your journey now. You'll probably suffer in the name of new experiences and growth, but you'll also realize that suffering is necessary, that sometimes the ecstasy makes all of the struggle worth it in ways that we can't fully understand at the time. And this album is the result of what happened once I pulled the blinds up. I realized in a substantial way that life had layers and depths I'd never known. I discovered that one could actually have much more dominion over their own life and fate than most are willing to appreciate. Finally, I learned that we can approach this entire game different if we change our thought process about the game in the first place. This is an inquiry into the way that things might be different, but you shouldn't start listening without the full understanding and consent that you may very well be pulling the blinds up. Might not even feel like it now, but thoughts planted have a way of sprouting years down the road, and we never can tell what they're going to grow into. Our job is simply to be open to the growth. That some of these concepts put forward are outlandish and hard to grapple with. My only request is that you hold space for the concepts, allow what resonates as truth for you to become integrated into your psyche and ditch the rest. Seek the truth, speak from the heart, and have the courage to accept whatever emerges. I know of no better way to live a worthwhile adventure. Our typical response to our problems is to change everything except our inner state. Ironically, we often respond by trying to lose ourselves in the world. We make drastic changes in our appearance and go on trips to find ourselves. While the shift in perspective gained from a new spot on the map can be beneficial, what you'll inevitably find is that the search will never turn over the answers you're looking for. Regardless of how far you travel or where you go, when the dust finally settles, you'll still be the same person who started running all that time ago. This mode of existential problem solving is rendered ineffective by the fact that you cannot possibly escape yourself while simultaneously finding yourself. Acting as if one can be found has a tendency to position us so that we're looking outward in our search. If we can just be in the right place or get the right job, we reason, all of our troubles will go away. Instead, we should strive to know ourselves at an intimate level. This level of self-knowledge is typically the result of radical honesty and a commitment to staying in the tension of emotion without running, coping in a harmful way, or hiding. Most of our dysfunction occurs because we only know the character we've been playing for the world, the persona we believe we need to be to find belonging and love in the world. Once you begin to get a glimpse of the freedom found in rediscovering the real you, the mask will begin to lose its appeal rather quickly. Knowing oneself is not about creating the new, but rather dredging up the forgotten and working through the ignored. You, in the truest sense of who you are, have been buried under the chaotic world around you. You must go back to the very moment you walked out of your essence and into the world. This is where the original fracture in your psyche took place, so this is where you must go to mend it. By reparenting your inner child and teaching them to face the world without the mask, you reclaim the best of who you are. People have so much trouble finding their own identity and understanding exactly who they are because of the dynamic nature of the self. The paradoxical nature of our being is felt when you realize you must be in touch with the eternal and unchanging self, your soul or essence. Yet you're also in constant flux, as the version of you that shows up in the physical world is always making slight modifications based on the environment you're in. Our challenge is to allow our essence to shine through despite the perceived tyranny of the environment around us. The deeper we get into self, the more ease we feel when we're in the world. If you can remember that you're the one playing the game, but aren't necessarily the character you're playing, you can hold space for the fact that your character will evolve and change throughout the course of your life. And that's okay. Every evolution of your personality, interests, or passions is not a reason for an identity crisis. If you've previously taught yourself to deny parts of who you are for the sake of belonging to the world around you, you're limiting your own toolset for interacting with it. The anger you've learned to repress might be useful if you find yourself coming up against injustice, and you can learn to use it instead of having it use you. The heartbreak that you feel might open you up so you can experience the world in new and deeper ways. After all, how can a heart ever expand if it's not broken open? You might be able to follow your own suffering into a place that allows you to transmute the suffering of others. It's also likely that in doing so, your life will become incredibly meaningful to you. If most people do not have a fulfilled life, it is because they are too afraid of the path that will lead them there. It's through answering our call to adventure that our lives adopt a cycle of death and rebirth as the ego dies over and over in the underworld so that we can create the new within the one life we have. By answering whatever you're called to, you'll be subjected to lessons, and those lessons, although painful, will teach you who you need to be to continue. The less ego death that you suffer in this moment, the more stagnant you'll become. By committing to the process of growth through the death of the outermost self, we keep ourselves on top of the turbulent waters that always sit below the surface of our lives. In this, we see that to be born again is not the intellectual property of any single doctrine, but rather the birthright of every being who's been thrust into an impermanent existence with the courage to face it. The hero is an adventurer at heart, and the adventurer always chooses the narrow path that winds along steep and unstable cliffs instead of the paved sidewalks, because they know that if they do not, their soul will pay the price. The safe route and the route that will yield growth are almost always different. The thing about having two paths to choose from is that one will most likely seem easier than the other, and that one will probably be at odds with the right one. The person who ignores her own call will continue to feel estranged from herself and the world around her. All the while, the answer to her misery lies on the ignored path. It's not until the discontent of not knowing herself outweighs the fear of falling to the jagged rocks below the steep and narrow path of the cliff that she will decide to answer the call. Ignoring who you really are and what you really want can be comforting for a time as you receive outside validation for your ability to conform. But there will be no meaning found in this life. When you begin diving inward and prioritizing the voice within, instead of the many outside voices that surround you, you proactively build resilience. You create a sound frame that the world cannot penetrate because you're no longer asking it for validation. Once we remember who we are, we begin playing a game that is altogether different from the one society is playing. Resilience is not about resisting the constant change in your life. It's about flowing with it without losing track of who you are in the process. Jim Carrey said, "I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they've ever dreamed of, so they can see that it's not their answer." In the hero myth, the Holy Grail symbolizes the attainment of ultimate meaning. It's elusive, and many heroes never reach it. They may be close enough to see it, but seeing and having are not the same thing. When ambition becomes the God we serve, it is increasingly likely that we will live with the Grail just outside of our grasp. We'll be surrounded by goodness in every direction, but completely unable to touch it. This is the worst kind of hell for a human to live in. The problem is that it's difficult to appreciate what you have when you've convinced yourself that your answer lies in the ambiguous destination that is more. We need more stuff, more achievement, more hustle. It means that we're always looking ahead and we're rarely present. The Grail will be close, but we won't drink from it because contentment becomes the represented enemy of ambition. If I were to tell you to push harder to get your dream life, it might make you comfortable by reinforcing your worldview, and it might trend on social media, but it won't lead you to contentment. That's only going to be found on the path that you've yet to take. If you've tried doing, you may want to just try being. Somewhere between those two paths is a life of ultimate meaning. Knowing when to push on the gas pedal and when to ease on the brake is a matter of discernment that one must build by reflecting honestly about the fruits of their labor. The world almost always tells us whether something is working or not via real-time feedback. We're the ones who are so dead set on what we want that we treat all the red flags like gates in a downhill ski race, blowing past them as quickly as possible to get to our finish line. Unchecked ambition has a neediness to it that sends the wrong signal to the universe. By always needing more, you're living out of scarcity. Because the outside world is such a reflection of your inner state, you'll find that you've created a scarce environment to live from. You're constantly telling the world around you that you aren't enough and you need more to be whole, good, or content. When you think you need something, you add a hint of desperation to your action. And desperate people tend to do stupid things in the name of what they want. By the way, is any of this making any sense to you at all? I know when you grow up worshiping at the altar of ambition, it's hard to think about anything else. I could always say it in a different way. Another side effect of unchecked ambition is forward progress at all costs. When life shows you that you've taken a wrong turn or shows you something that must be improved upon, you're likely to think it's just another thing in your way to be pushed over or driven through. And as far as tools go, ambition is a hammer. If you apply it to every job that comes along, there will be some destruction that takes place. You'll get everything to fit, but at what cost? When ambition becomes the thing in your life instead of the mechanism that helps you get to the thing, your decisions gradually become more robotic as you prioritize forward progress over everything else. It's all too easy to lose track of what is real and what matters when you're looking through the lens of unbridled ambition for material gain. The problem with becoming robotic in your actions as you move through life is that at the end of the day, you still have to contend with being human. You still have to exist in the world with other humans.
When drive is your only motivator, the chances of you alienating those other humans become significantly greater. You're better off putting ambition in the passenger seat and allowing consciousness to drive. If you don't, you're handing the keys to your well-being over to an unreliable drunk and hoping he can drive you home. You'll endure great emotional highs and lows as you subject yourself to all that could go wrong and all that could go right. As anyone who has ever done anything great in life can tell you, there's much more of the former. When you lose yourself to your ambition, unforeseen obstacles no longer become only about finding a way forward, but also about finding yourself, as every threat to the task becomes a personal threat to who you are. Not losing yourself to your ambition is one of the most difficult things that a driven person will ever have to face. Keep yourself in the game by realizing it's just that, a game, one of many which you'll play while you're here. One day I began to see my quest for validation and achievements as absurd activities that were keeping me from what I was really here for. It was in that moment I understood what the ancient Chinese philosopher Confucius meant when he said, "We have two lives, and the second begins when we realize that we only have one." With whatever time you have left, what will your life have to look like to make it so that all of the hardships you're going through actually are worth the pain they cause? It's not reasonable to assume that you should eat up any more of your time with ego-driven pursuits of ambition without the proper thought behind them. Because ambition will mean a lot more when it's applied in a direction that's actually right for you. Most of us are keeping our foot on the gas without realizing that we're still in the roundabout. We use articulation to not only tell others who we are, but also to read and navigate among those around us. But humans are limited by what they can express verbally, which is often why revolution is first ignited with art. Because when words fall short, other senses serve to pick up the slack.
The English language is quite limiting in its ability to express complex ideas.
We express our love for our spouse, best friend, new car, and favorite television show with the same word.
But love is far too nuanced and deep to be expressed with only a single word.
There's love that serves as the ultimate reality and binds our entire existence. In most religions, the word God is a synonym for unconditional love. Most theology consists of humans that have been loved into existence.
That makes our life a gift, and is precisely why reverence for life can create such positive transformation in our spirit. When we love, we are speaking the language that God understands.
If you wonder where God is during difficult times, times such as the Holocaust, you need only to look for where love is. Love was found in the inspired words of Viktor Frankl. He said, "For the first time in my life, I saw the truth as it is set into song by so many poets, proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers. The truth, that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love and in love."
The fact that he was able to see truth in such words amidst such hate, enduring indescribable heartache, expresses the pinnacle of human alchemy. To open our hearts with enough love to soak up the hate around us is a choice that we have.
To choose to accept love as our birthright is a choice we have. To not be defined by the darkness of our environment, but by the light inside of us is a choice we have.
Surely, All of that cannot be confined to the word I use to talk about my favorite album or book.
Essentially, our language has funneled us into a misguided understanding of love. And just like with anything, a view that is too simplistic leads us to engage with it improperly. We treat it as if it is something to be won.
We treat the love of others as if it says something about who we are.
We propagate that message to impressionable girls and boys all over the world through various social media outlets. And then we wonder why so many of us absolutely screw up the role that love plays in our lives. And further, why that love is contributing to so much discontent.
When you take something like the ultimate reality, the thing that makes life worth living in the first place, and then you turn it into a game that requires contestants to change who they are and compete to win it, you can start to see why our understanding of it is so poor.
Unfortunately, we've learned that basic human rights, such as love and belonging, are things we must earn or win.
In turn, we devise lists of things we should do, things we believe will make us acceptable to others, and things that will keep us safe from too much criticism or discomfort.
We often act as if the one who fits in the best is the winner. But what exactly is it that they've won? Validation? Acceptance?
Of course not. Those were awarded to the mask they've learned to wear. Unfortunately, our mask is not able to keep us warm at night.
Love is also the thing that for most of us actually makes our lives worth living. The feeling of falling in love is exhilarating and scary as hell.
There's truly nothing like it. Falling out of love or experiencing unreciprocated love can feel as if your entire world is actually collapsing around you. Nothing could be worth that amount of heartache.
Except, of course, the one reason that we continue to engage with the world in this way, which is to fall in love in the first place. As what we've been taught clashes with what we need, we often find that we have competing ideals within our own psyche. What we need often appears too individualistic in nature, and because we aren't taught to prioritize ourselves, we bury our true ambitions deep down inside. We're conditioned to believe we should accept something more altruistic or more responsible than our needs demand. So here we are, gridlocked in the middle, doing what we think we should do and avoiding what is calling to our depth. We're never honest about the things we really need. So we set up shop in the land of should, the land of settling and mediocrity. It's where we built our entire culture. You do want money, but believe that you should only want virtue. So deep down, the conflict manifests as resentment. Resentment toward what you want, but what your mind won't allow you to have. Well, rich people are greedy anyway. You do want to look good naked, but that sounds vain and you should strive for health and self-love. Since you've decided those things are at odds, you relent, and that manifests as baggy clothes hiding a body you'd rather not show off and ambitions you hope to keep hidden as well, so that they don't earn you a label of conceited. You think that if you want to change something about yourself, you must not love yourself. Well, people who want to change their bodies are unhappy anyway. You do want freedom and your time to do activities, hobbies, and things that interest you, but you should work hard at a stable job, so that manifests as you working 40 or more hours a week for someone else's dream while you continue to live for the weekends. Yeah, but they've got great benefits. You do want to travel the world, but you should get a mortgage because it's such a great investment. And that manifests as at least $250,000 in debt, which is closer to $1 million by the time it's paid off. Plus, you're handcuffed to the job you may or may not like. A semi-permanent anchor ensures that you never get to explore all of the areas in the world that are begging for your presence. Yeah, I know, but it's the American dream. You do want a relationship that gives you sex like a 90s R&B song, adventure you can't believe you get to share with anyone else, and a level of comfort that allows someone else to know you for your quirky, true self. But the last time you went for it, you got your heart broken, and who in the hell would want to repeat that? Plus, according to society, you should be settled down by now, so you stick with the safe bet, and all of your settling down inadvertently becomes settling for. Yeah, but they're good to me. Plus, dating is hard. You want to be known for having done something great. You want to be known for having made a contribution to this world that you can be proud of. On some level, we all crave significance, but you've surely been told to be wary of taking on too much. And maybe that's true. Maybe the weight of your true ambitions would crush you if you ever really went after them. And then again, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe you're actually perfectly positioned to accomplish that one thing you've always wanted to do. And isn't this inauthentic life kind of crushing you anyway? Sure, it's not acute pain, but the constant vying for attention from people that don't freely give it, and desperately trying to live up to someone else's invisible standard, can't be that easy. We all have a really hard time confronting the things we really want because of some sort of misplaced altruism or allegiance to a standard that we never asked for. And this calls into question a bigger problem. We are settling, but do we even know what the actual cost is of all this settling? The cost is precisely what the outcome might be if you stop settling, but it's actually more than you might imagine because there's more than just you to consider. There is the personal cost, of course, which is essentially the life you're leaving on the table and won't get to live as a consequence. And there's also an impact on the world at large. What if you began to prioritize yourself and the things you want? How much better might your life be? How much happier might you be? And if you were to be happier, fitter, or wealthier, how much better would you be positioned to help the people around you? What if your radical change in health inspired the people around you to do the same? What if you believe that a happier and healthier world started with you first giving those things to yourselves? You see, this is the paradox. It's not an opposition. To help others, we must first help ourselves. To love others, we must first love ourselves. We don't do these things for ourselves at the cost of others. Because what business isn't the world getting because you're too afraid to start it? How much better would that stranger's day be if you smiled in the morning because of the opportunity before you instead of glumly walking by as you head for the fate you feel locked into? And this is going to sound radical, but what if we all smiled in the morning because of that same opportunity? It's almost impossible to know the ripple effect that chasing our ambitions could have. And what we do know for sure is the outcome when we allow the fear of going against the grain to dictate our actions. And this is worth noting because you're already aware of the downside. See, if you go for it, like really go all in on the life you want, and it ends up not working out, you know you can go back to living for the weekends because the rat race is always accepting applications. You know, the way I see it, we don't have an alternative because don't you want the best for yourself? The best experiences, foods, and the best the world has to offer? Aren't you worthy of that? And aren't you going to be working hard either way? Aren't you going to struggle either way? See, we get what we accept in this life, and if you accept a life you don't want, you'll never get what you actually deserve. So make lists of things you want to do, places you want to go, and experiences that you want to have. Explore things and ideas that interest you. For God's sake, make this life your own. Go out on a limb, ask that person out on a date, go against the grain, start a business, dedicate yourself to things, even if other people don't understand them. Say yes when you're scared and no when you're bored. Start practicing radical self-awareness. Do the world a favor and just be you. Unabridged, raw, original you. In a world full of half-hearted replicas, we could use more authentic humans. You might not create the next Apple, but honestly, even waking up in the morning with the hope that you might is about 1,000 times better than punching the clock day in and day out, laying bricks for a building that you don't even want to live in. All the things you should do are sapping you of your energy and robbing you of your natural gifts and talents. The unfortunate byproduct of that same settling is that the world is being robbed of the authentic you. And that you might be poised to do something great. So quit being so afraid of what you really want, because you want to have your cake and eat it too. But we've all been conditioned to believe that this isn't a realistic expectation. The truth is, having a cake you're not allowed to taste would suck. And the same thing goes for your life. Between the cradle and the grave, a lot will transpire. Some of it will be awesome, and the price we pay for that awe to occur is the opportunity for what's wrong to present itself. We cannot love fully without exposing ourselves to great heartache. The human experience is found as we endlessly navigate these polarities. What it means to be human is to lean into the activities, conversations, and moments of discomfort, because everything you do is a celebratory act of that very moment. It means that regardless of the setbacks and the obstacles, you keep progressing, not because there is somewhere to get, but because the best parts of this life only reveal themselves in the steps we never thought we had the courage or talent to take. And we were not meant for utopia, but instead to shoulder the burden of never having it. We're here to contend with our lives, and as we do in a forthright manner, we're gifted with the holy grail of meaning. One sip from that chalice, and we instantly understand that the heartache was simply the price of admission. This is a price we will pay many times if we are to live a life with our eyes open. Pay attention to these moments of meaning when it feels as if the entire world opens up to you. It may come in the middle of a sporting event when time is slowed, and for a brief moment you're given full reign over the kingdom. It may come when you hear your lover laugh and you're unexpectedly and suddenly transported to another world entirely. You want to pay attention to these moments because there are a great many people out there who will try to convince you that God is out there somewhere beyond the stars, keeping guard over the pearly gates with a record book of all your rights and wrongs and banishing the unworthy. But the truth is that we banish ourselves from heaven because we count ourselves unworthy. For those with the eyes to see, heaven is in our midst, and it's always inviting us to participate in its endless game of hide and seek. The secret is that we do not get there by overcoming our humanity, but by leaning into it. Since the question is not if we will die, it then becomes how might we live so fully alive that our inevitable death is rendered bearable. How might we live so that our days are so full of life that by the time death touches our broad shoulders with its brittle hands, we have an eternal smile, knowing that the world is unequivocally and unarguably better for having had us in it, that our presence was felt rippling through eternity on the back of all that we became and the time we were given. My hope is that you realize this before it's over. That way, whenever your internal energy is set free from the limits of your bodily structure, those whose lives were changed by you having been here can say that you did it right, that you lived in a way that rendered something as awful as death just a bit more bearable, that you stood while others knelt and set sail while others clung to the safety of the shore, that you were love amidst heartbreak, light amidst the dark, and music amidst silence, that despite the limited number of your days, your years were full of life. My prayer for you is that you learn to see the inevitable death of what was as the birth of what is and what will be. This is the eternal invitation to embody the hero in your own life. As a human, part of your story will be inconsequential in the long run. You have a body that billions of years from now will most likely exist as dust floating in the cosmos on a planet that used to hold life. You also have an operating system that allows you to reason with the gods and dream up the limits of your world beyond physics. You have this moment and this day, and the hero is the one who steps up to face whatever it is that the moment holds, not because they desire the validation, but because in all of existence, the opportunity to align yourself with what's right and what brings meaning is a gift that is uniquely human.